If you've ever said sorry for things that weren't really your fault, if you apologize when someone bumps into you, if you rewrite a text 3 times just to make sure it doesn't sound wrong, this might not be politeness. It might be protection. People who apologize too much often don't even notice they're doing it. It slips out automatically. Sorry for asking a question, for taking up space, for having an opinion, for feeling hurt. It doesn't look like a big deal, but psychologically, it says more than you think. At the surface, constant apologizing looks like kindness, like empathy, like emotional maturity, and sometimes it is. But when it becomes a reflex, when it shows up even in neutral or harmless situations, it usually points to something deeper, an early lesson. Somewhere along the way, the nervous system learned that keeping the peace was safer than expressing the truth. As children, we don't choose our coping mechanisms. We adapt to our environment. If you grew up in a home where conflict felt overwhelming, where tension filled the room quickly, where someone's mood could shift without warning, your brain started looking for ways to prevent emotional explosions. One of the fastest ways to do that? Take responsibility, even when it wasn't yours. A child who says sorry first often avoids escalation. The apology becomes a shortcut to safety. It smooths things over. It lowers voices. It restores temporary calm. And the brain remembers that. Over time, apologizing stops being about guilt. It becomes about control. Not control over others, but control over outcomes. If I take the blame, maybe this won't turn into something bigger. If I soften myself first, maybe I won't be rejected. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people think over-apologizing is about low confidence, but it's rarely about confidence. It's about threat detection. When someone apologizes excessively, their nervous system may still be scanning for disapproval, for subtle shifts in tone, for micro-expressions that suggest someone is upset. They're not weak, they're alert. You might notice it in small ways. You send a message and immediately worry it sounded rude. You ask for clarification and then say, "Sorry if that's confusing." Someone seems quiet, and you assume you did something wrong. Your mind starts replaying the interaction, not because you love drama, but because your system is trying to restore emotional equilibrium. Another layer most people miss is identity. When apologizing becomes habitual, it slowly shapes how you see yourself. You begin to occupy less space in conversations. You soften your preferences. You downplay your needs. You phrase opinions as questions. "I'm sorry, but maybe we could." Over time, this creates a subtle internal belief. My comfort matters less than harmony. And that belief doesn't form randomly. It often forms in environments where expressing anger, disappointment, or disagreement wasn't safe. Maybe emotions were dismissed. Maybe mistakes were magnified. Maybe love felt conditional on being easy. So you became easy. You became agreeable. You became the one who absorbs tension before it spreads. That's not weakness. That's adaptation. But there's another side to this pattern. Constant apologizing can also be a way of staying ahead of rejection. If I criticize myself first, maybe you won't. If I admit fault quickly, maybe you'll stay. It's a preemptive move, a quiet attempt to secure belonging. And belonging is a powerful driver. Humans are wired to preserve connection. For some people, apologizing became the glue. It kept relationships intact. It reduced unpredictability. It created the illusion of stability. But here's the deeper truth. When sorry becomes automatic, it often disconnects you from your actual feelings. Because not every moment requires guilt. Sometimes you're not wrong. Sometimes you're just present. And yet the apology still appears, like muscle memory. The brain loves predictability. If something worked in childhood, even in a chaotic environment, it keeps using it. It doesn't update easily. It doesn't pause and ask, "Is this still necessary?" It just runs the old script. You may even notice that when someone tells you, You don't need to apologize. It feels slightly uncomfortable, almost exposed. Because without the apology, there's vulnerability. There's uncertainty about how the other person will respond. The apology was the shield. Without it, you're just there. And that can feel unfamiliar. There's also a quiet emotional cost to this pattern. When you constantly take responsibility for maintaining emotional balance, you may become hyper-aware of everyone else's feelings, but less aware of your own. You sense tension quickly. You adjust quickly. You repair quickly. But you might struggle to sit with your own discomfort without trying to neutralize it. That's the deeper pattern. Over-apologizing isn't about being too nice. It's about emotional safety. It's about a nervous system that learned early that harmony equals survival. And once you see that, the behavior makes sense. The person who apologizes too much isn't fragile. They're often the one who grew up reading the room before they could read a book. They learned how to shrink tension, how to soften edges, how to protect connection. That ability came from somewhere. It was never random. It was a pattern. And awareness of that pattern changes how you see yourself. The apology stops being proof of weakness and starts being evidence of adaptation. You weren't too sensitive. You were adjusting. You weren't overreacting. You were preventing. And once you understand the hidden reason behind the habit, you start to notice it differently. Not with shame, not with judgment, just recognition. If this explains something you've quietly wondered about yourself, there's more beneath the surface than you think. Understanding the pattern is where it begins. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.